Hi there, it's Kate. I am here. I don't know that I would say that I'm back, but I'm here. It has been quite a while since I have filmed a video. It's been like 5 months or something. So I thought today I would just really quickly kind of explain where I've been and what happened. And then hopefully, not hopefully, and then I have a stack of some of my favorite books from the last year that I read. Sort of a favorite books of 2019, but a favorite with the caveat that these are the books that I had handy and physical copies in the bookshelves behind me, so certainly not all of the books that I read. The pool that I was drawing from was limited. So first of all, where I went, basically the short answer is that I got a job. After we moved here to Georgia last winter, about a year ago, it was a really, really big transition, and it was really, really hard. And I started, honestly, really half-heartedly applying for jobs. And I ended up really kind of unexpectedly being offered a position. So I don't even think I'm an adjunct. I'm whatever comes below an adjunct. I have a very contingent position that is like semester to semester, teaching history at a local college. Oh, I think that was thunder. I think it's thundering outside. Hopefully you won't be able to hear the thunder. So anyways, last semester I taught American history, and then this semester I am teaching 2 sections of world history. Can you see this cat? There's a cat joining me here. So yeah, and that's taken up a lot of my reading time and just a lot of my spare time, quote unquote spare time. Also, my children don't nap anymore. We got some cats. This is Sammy the cat, and she is a very sweet kitty cat. So anyways, let me talk about what I've been reading. So one of the things that happened this year between, especially with working, but also just, hi, those are claws, just moving and everything that was happening, I read a lot more science fiction and fantasy than I have read in the couple years prior to this year. That makes sense. So I read almost no literary fiction, mostly sci-fi, fantasy, and then like some cozy mysteries and Regency romance, actually, which I think is interesting. And this is definitely the reading pattern that I had when I was in graduate school as well. I find that when I'm reading a lot of history and immersed in history, I just I don't want to read literary fiction. So anyways, let me talk about what I did read. I just grabbed one of these books, but I finished the second 2 books of the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb. I'd finished the first book the very beginning of the year, or the very end of 2018, I don't remember. Ow, those are claws. So I finished all the way through the Live Ship Traders, which is the second series in this world, and then, I also finished on my Kindle, so I don't have hard copies, the next trilogy in the series, which is the Tawny Man series. And I didn't like that one as much. This Live Ship Traders I'd heard was the best trilogy of the series, and I totally agree. It was really amazing. The nice thing about the Tawny Man trilogy is it kind of brings everything together from the first 2 trilogies, but it also, holy cow, this cat and her claws, it also kind of returns us to some of the flaws in Robin Hobb's writing of the first trilogy, in that it's really drawn out. A lot of the writing is really repetitive and predictable. Still good, still love the characters, but I'm going to take a break before I read the final trilogy, which is the Rain Wilds River trilogy, I believe. Hi. Say hi. Hi. I reread The Philosopher's Flight so that I could read The Philosopher's War, which was the sequel and came out this year. I still really recommend The Philosopher's Flight. So the premise of this book is this is World War I, kind of alternate reality in which some women are able to fly and conduct magic. Like they fly through a certain kind of magic. And so therefore women in this story have a very specific kind of power that men don't have, but men still hold political power. And so the women's kind of magical power is at times viewed with a lot of suspicion and hostility from the politically powerful men. And the story is about a man who has this flying magic, and so it's it kind of is, it's a gender bending type of story. The Philosopher's Flight I really enjoyed. The Philosopher's War, which is the second book, was much more of a war story. This was much more of a like explore the world, explore this this concept, and the war story was much more just about the war and fighting the war. And I didn't see much different in any other war story. So I still really recommend this one. I would say that its sequel, the jury is still out for me. Okay, now on to books that I loved a lot. I won a giveaway for the Reading Women. They did, for Reading Women Month, I think it was in June, they did like a bingo, and I won from the publisher this book, A Winter's Promise by Christelle Dabos, from Europa, the publisher. And this, I think, is technically a YA book, but honestly, I couldn't tell that it was YA. So it's about, it is very much a fantasy world in which kind of the world itself has fragmented, and there are many different worlds throughout the universe. I don't know that that's the best way to describe it. Our main character, and I don't remember her name now because it's been such a long time since I read this. Ophelia is our main character, and she is a reader, so she can touch objects and know their history. And she is promised in marriage to someone from kind of a different world, and whom she's never met before, and she goes to live on this other world and learns about this man that she's affianced to, and the politics and intrigue of this other world and how it relates to her own world, if that makes sense. So I finished this one and this one. These are translated from the French. This is the second book, called The Missing of Clair de Lune. No, I think it was this one that I won, and I purchased the first one. I think that's what it was. I think I won this one in the giveaway, and then I purchased the first one, and I'm so glad I did. These are actually really good books. I'm trying to look for it. These were translated by Hildegard Searle. And like I said, they're YA, but there isn't a romance. There's an engagement, but no romance. And it's a lot about Ophelia learning, doing all she can to learn about the world around her and kind of her own place in the world around her. And I love those kind of stories. So this is great. I just actually remembered another book that I don't know where it is. I reread and then read the final in the Becky Chambers series that starts with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. So I read the first two, and then I read the third book, and I think I talked about those in my channel when I did read them, and I highly recommend those books. Even if you don't like sci-fi, I would recommend those books. Because they feel, yes, they're about aliens and this kind of weird science, but I think they're more about humanity and how humanity interacts with each other, and people, humanity that is different than us. And then Becky Chambers also released a novella that I'm not remembering the name of, but I read that as well. I read that in one night when I had this terrible insomnia and I couldn't sleep, and so I just stayed up and read this book, and it was about humans who were kind of in deep space and doing science and researching kind of these faraway planets in the attempts to look for a potentially habitable planet. Anyways, it was really good. It was a good novella, and I normally don't care for novellas, so I like that one. Then a couple of literary fiction. I read The Gods of Howell Mountain by Taylor Brown. And I actually really like this one, and I think this is probably some of the only... Oh, so this one, and then The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek is actually another really good one that are kind of similar in that they take place kind of in the Appalachian Mountains. They're historical, and they tell you a story about someone that you probably wouldn't have otherwise heard from. The writing in this book is really beautiful. I didn't care for the plot, and I'm not even sure that I cared for the characters that much, but I loved the writing. The very first paragraph in this book made me want to read about, it's about a car driving, and it made me want to read about cars, and I've never been drawn to a description of a car driving down the road before until I read this book, and it was beautiful, and it kind of blew me away. Second to last book I'll talk about, I read The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, and I really like this book. This is actually this is a Reading Women. I got this as a book blind date from the Reading Women, which I highly recommend, because I had picked this book up and put it down a couple of years ago, and I picked it up and finished it this time, and I'm so glad that I did, because I really, really enjoyed this. This was a great fall time, kind of dark and dreary and beautiful and haunting story that I really enjoyed reading. Okay, lastly, probably the best book that I read all year, maybe not the best, my most favorite book that I read all year. This is pretty hardcore science fiction, I think. Maybe not hardcore science fiction, because there's not a lot of aliens. But anyways, this is Neal Stephenson's Seven Eves. And this is a book that, again, I had started probably 2 years ago, put down because it took a little bit to get into it, and I picked it back up this summer, I guess? Yeah, I must have picked it up in July. And so my brother, it's funny, I was telling my brother, who got this for me for Christmas 2 years ago, that when I was thinking of what to get him for Christmas this year, I kept thinking, I was like, oh, that book that I read that was really good, that took place in space, and I kept thinking that I wanted to give it to him, but then I would remember that he's the one that gave it to me. So that's the type of book I keep thinking about it. My husband read it first, which is unusual in our house, and so he and I have these conversations about it still. So the premise of this book is that the moon has blown up. Nobody knows why, and that's not really important. The point is there is no moon anymore, which means that there are no tides. The Earth cannot exist on its own. And then not only that, but there are fragments of the moon that are eventually bombarding the Earth. And so the book is about the astronauts who were on the International Space Station at the time that the moon blows up become leaders in the effort to get as many people and as much information from Earth as we possibly can off of Earth and onto the space station in order to save humanity, basically. That's the first half of the book. And then the second half of the book, I don't want to tell you because it would probably be a spoiler, but just know that there are two very different parts of the book, and they are both very good. So we follow both what's happening on the ground on Earth and also what's happening in the space station, and what the efforts are to expand the station. Who do we pick who gets to go up into space? How do we pick what information goes up into space? And then how do we deal with some personalities, for example, the President of the United States, there are some characters in here who are very clearly meant to represent people who are very living people today, if that makes sense. So like there's a scientist in here who is very clearly a Neil deGrasse Tyson or Bill Nye the Science Guy character. The president of the United States is a woman, so she's kind of a Hillary Clinton figure. And so that is kind of fun to see that kind of like speculative, like what could happen. I guess maybe this would be considered speculative fiction. Anyways, it's really, really good, and it really makes you think of like, I don't know, consequences, long-term consequences, short-term consequences, like planetary type of consequences, if that makes sense. So like eco-conscious type of things. It's a book that I literally cannot stop thinking about still, and wish that I could read. I keep reading. I did some research, and apparently it was optioned for film, but the director who was on the project then worked on something else, and so it's just basically stalled out and isn't going anywhere, which is really sad because I think it would be a fantastic movie. And then when you get to the second half of the book and you get to learn even more about what was happening on Earth, or what did happen on Earth, and it's just fascinating. And so yeah, I would recommend this if you're interested in kind of what happens to the Earth type of questions. This is a really great examination of what could happen to the Earth and what could happen to humanity if something tragic happens to the Earth. Like, I don't know, global warming isn't what happens here, but it's basically the same kind of effect. So yeah, those were some of my favorite books of the year. Sorry, this is kind of a crazy disjointed video, but I hope that that you had a great reading year. If you've read any of these, or if you want to read any of these, let me know. I hope that you do. I hope you got some great ideas. I will talk to you later. Bye.